Well, I think it's time we admit Steve Kerr is a genius. The way he's dangled that carrot out in front of these young guys all this time. And so when they finally get their opportunity, they look amazing. That's kind of been my theme this last month with these injuries and these woes is, hey, one, you got to find your opportunity in your misfortune. And how often when you look back at runs in sports, a lot of it you stumble into. You stumble into Draymond Green over David Lee. You stumble into Brock Purdy, right? There are these things that kind of happen by accident. And so obviously, the reality is if we didn't have these injuries, we probably would never see Guy Santos or Quentin Post play any meaningful minutes for this team this season. And that is a problem when it comes to Steve Kerr's decision-making with the rotations in the pecking order. But where I will give Steve Kerr credit is that looked like a hungry team that's believing in what they do last night. And these last couple of weeks, like I know I had a video tour was like, has he lost the team? Where it just looked like they're not going to play hard anymore. Like, has he lost the locker room? And I thought he was wavering on that for a second, but however it's happened, whether it's faith or just these young guys and their hunger, but all of a sudden this team looks hungry, reinvigorated Steph Curry and energized, and they're playing hard for Steve Kerr. Right? That's the reality of it. But let's talk about Quentin Post here because, listen, I think we all were curious to see him, right? Everyone was like, hey, throw him out there. Let's see what he can do. We're already getting our teeth kicked in. We have no size. We're injured. And here he is, right? I don't think anybody imagined this impact this quickly, right? And Quentin Post is a grown-ass man, dog. Like, that's what I tweeted out, meaning, like, He's 24 years old, right? And usually these foreign kids too are a little more mature, just culturally having to relocate to a new place and stuff like that. But when you watch him play with his pace, and he's one of these guys at his size, he can only play at one pace, but there's a calmness to his game for a guy who's only played like a handful of minutes in the NBA, right? There's a calmness with his decision making, and he's a guy who understands how big he is. And I know that sounds kind of silly, but there are so many 6'10", 7-foot guys in the NBA who want to play small and don't quite understand how simple the game can be with that size. James Wiseman, right? You know who he kind of reminds me of is Marc Gasol. Now, Marc Gasol won Defensive Player of the Year in Memphis. I'm not saying that that's ever going to be his trajectory, but just in, again, his temperament and his skill set and his frame, where I think one thing that frightened me when you saw him in Summer League and the little bits that you saw him was he's wobbly defensively, right? You're like, well, that doesn't look good. It looks like he might fall over, right? But what it really is he's constantly keeping his feet moving. And so when a guy like jab steps him or something, he'll kind of like rock back or like wobble. But what Quentin understands is because he doesn't have the quickest of feet and mobility, that if his feet stop, that's where he's going to lose. So he's got to keep his feet moving. And so that's why it looks a little wobbly, but it's effective. You combine that with effort, hustle, and then IQ and that size. And I think at least through these first two games of seeing him play real actual minutes, Dub Nation's like, oh, we can work with that. Like defensively, right? Like he's in the right place at the right time. He hustles. And I think most importantly, when you're dealing with a 7-footer, do you understand the personnel and what we're trying to do? Scheme-wise, as also KYP. Like there were a couple possessions last night where Zach LaVine got to cooking, right? Like he typically does. And they call Quentin up into the ball screen, and he understood what LaVine wanted, that LaVine's priority was to get his. So he showed super high, backpedaled and recovered. He's prioritizing the right things on the floor. For him to be doing that from day one with his NBA action is very encouraging. And then, of course, the pick and pop game, right? And his screen game, his pick and roll, his screen game, he sets advanced screens. He already has the loony kind of get wide and just kind of roll. He got hit. The call in Sacramento the other night was an abomination. I don't know how it's a moving screen when Fox runs into his pivot foot. The pivot foot doesn't move. The pivot foot means that foot was there first. So that one was bad. He is going to get some rookie calls, but you can tell he has an advanced feel in the pick and roll game and pick and pop game, a feel that we haven't seen from a guy a young big that we've had, I don't, you tell me. You tell me. Mark with a C Jackson, like I don't, it's been a long time, right? And the other thing that's interesting, when you are a pick and pop center, the timing of your pop or your roll now, like rollers, right? Like Trace, these bouncy guys, and Trace sets good screens. He does, right? But a lot of times with younger centers that want to roll to the basket, they don't want to hold the screen long, right? They're like, and then they want to get on their roll, right? But because Post also wants to pop, the timing of how he holds his screens and how wide he sets them, and just, there's a lot of nuance to it. It's at an advanced level. And you saw that smile on Steph Curry's face, right? I don't know when the last time I've seen Steph smile that much in a game. And not only is it just going to open things up, we all understand the spacing, the 5 out possibilities for he and Schroeder. But if you noticed that even his passes out of the screens are much easier. There were a couple sequences, once Post hit some threes, where Vucevic and Lonzo are in the screen action, and you're seeing Vooch point to Lonzo like, no, you got to stay on Post. Like, wait, hold on. And you see them, he was causing hesitation in the screen action like no other screener we've seen, no other big screener we've seen with Steph. And so not only is he going to have it's just an easier time, they can't just blitz him. And so now the pockets for his passes are much easier. So we don't want to get carried away, right? It was 2 games. And my guy, Ref Van Gundy on Twitter, he said, hey, my concern is the more physical big guys, right? Sabonis and Vucevic are about as physical as it gets. Like Sabonis, certainly, right? And he looked all right in that matchup in Sacramento. And Vucevic, like you think of him as finesse because he shoots the ball and he has touch, but like his footwork and his fundamentals on the block, like he's pretty physical. I think what we have to see is what he looks like against twitchy, bouncy centers, right? With the guys that are going to roll super hard where he can't recover and play the cat and mouse game like we've seen him do. Saturday night, the Lakers, Jackson Hayes should be a good test for that, right? Another young backup center who is going to roll and bounce and play above the rim. That's where, we'll see how he does with that. But the physicality and the IQ, the effort, I mean, I don't want to get carried away here, but y'all have to admit it. And so the next part of this conversation would be, we've been talking about getting Vucevic here for like 2 months. Quentin Post shows up and outplays Vooch last night, like flat out, like there's nothing to say about it, right? So you say, all right, well, maybe we just roll with Post, maybe, right? I like, that's certainly, I think, a conversation. The Bulls, if they are having a fire sale, like there's several guys I'd be interested in. Patrick Williams could use a change of scenery, right? Dusumu, I know he's a local kid there, but he would be a defensive upgrade, a bigger guard who can defend. So maybe it isn't Vucevic that's the trade. Did you hear Fitz? Did Fitz drop a dime last night on Mike Dunleavy? Did Fitz drop a dime? Because I think it was the second quarter. He goes, Zach LaVine has a lot of tentacles within the Warriors organization. He goes, Slow-Mo and Looney played at UCLA. Wiggins and he played in Minnesota. Kerr coached him in Tokyo. Just saying. So yeah, maybe the move now, they can, if Post can be the stretch big we've been looking for right now, then you set your sights to another wing or a bigger player, not a guard, unless it's a star guard like Zach LaVine, right? However, at the right price, if Chicago were to cave, because the latest rumor is the Bulls want a first-round pick for Vucevic. I'm not surprised. They certainly would want one for LaVine, right? But if they were to cave in for some second-round picks and expirings for Vucevic, I would still be down, and I could make the argument that having Vucevic would help Post develop, right? Because now he has a direct role model, and it gives you, again, the price is everything. But I'm not necessarily saying, all right, forget Vucevic. If you can get him at the right price, I still think it would be interesting, because now you have 2 options. Next week, if Post continues to stay in the rotation, we could be sitting here being like, oh, there's this hole and this. Like, we don't want to get carried away with it. And I think the most important concept is Steve Kerr kind of finally acknowledging how different and how easier things are for Steph with a pop big, with a stretch 5. Just like the Kerr opener, let me do something else that would be very unpopular amongst Dub Nation right now. You got to give the front office credit where credit is due. I'm not saying that they don't deserve blame for several things and why we're in the place we're at right now. I'm not saying that. However, you got to give them credit for sticking with Andrew Wiggins. I know I sure wasn't going to. And maybe the truth is they didn't have a choice, right? But over these last 2 years, like we all have our Wiggins trauma over his availability and all the drama, right? But in a vacuum, this season, are we sure that Andrew Wiggins isn't better than Jimmy Butler, like right now? Right? I know that because the Butler rumors and all that, right? And he's getting to the line. Like he's having these games where he doesn't shoot particularly well. He's still giving you 17, 18 points because all of a sudden he's a free throw machine. He's getting downhill. He's been good defensively. And I don't see why that can't continue moving forward. He's physically in the prime of his career. So I think you got to give them credit for sticking with Wiggins and seeing that this is a possibility. Because I certainly didn't think he was going to get back to this, right? We have to be honest with that. And then all the talk of lack of development from this organization, which is true and fair, right? I can make a whole video on the guys that didn't develop in the bad picks, but here we are with Guy Santos. Who quite frankly looks like a starting power forward. And I know I'm being a little hyperbolic here with Post and Guy, but they're giving us reason to be excited. And the shot is legit, right? The shot is legit. I talked about seeing him at Summer League, and he not only can he shoot it on the move, but what you notice is he always seams up. There's always like a perfect rotation on the ball, and then the happy feet work for him. He has different footwork to get to the shot and then the movement. But beyond the shooting, you know the motor's there, right? But defensively is where he's impressed me because you can see his mind is sharp. You can even hear, some of it's maybe lost in translation. He's a young kid, ESL, right? But the mind is sharp out there. And his effort to cover ground, I can't tell you how many times like a guy would leak out in transition and then you just see Guy full sprint. And so the pass was never there. He just ran him out of the pass, right? Or just getting over and banging into a body and then someone else gets the rebound. He's filling a lot of holes defensively with his size and effort and understanding that it's like a soccer player's mentality. I'm sure Guy played soccer growing up in Brazil, but with a lot of young players, the problem is when you watch them specifically defensively, there's these blips. There's like there's a pause between like what's happening. Okay, I've done this. Now what do I got to do? And then what I got to do, right? And when you take that beat and that pause, that's when you get beat. There's no pauses from Guy. When it comes to his passing, he sees it, he throws it, right? There's a switch, he's there. And he made some switches and some rotations where I'm like, dude, I can't be more impressed with Guy. I mean, it's exciting. I think now the next conversation would be what happens when Draymond and Kuminga come back, right? You heard Kerr allude to that already. Well, these guys, to me, I know it's a small sample size. Post and Guy have earned the right to be in the rotation moving forward. Like, y'all figure it out. And the reality is life without Draymond ain't looking so bad. Again, small sample size, but if you were to make a move and it's like, let's lean into the youth, you see Steph kind of, the look in his eyes was like, dang, okay, like this feel different. I kind of like this, right? If you moved him out of there, that opens up minutes for Guy, Kuminga, and these young guys and this energy. So yeah, man, a feel-good win, but it contextually how it looked and how it was done with these young guys and what it looks like, I think you got to feel pretty good. Considering this last month and how grim things have looked, all of a sudden, there's reason for hope and optimism moving forward with these young guys stepping up out of nowhere. Shout out to Moses. He proved me wrong. He's shooting the ball. He's on the hop. The release is quicker. And then what I've liked from Mo is he's passing the ball more. And it was kind of a running joke, right? On Twitter, it was like, Moses doesn't pass. He doesn't pass, right? And I had hypothesized this initially, but then after so long, I was like, nah, he probably just don't pass the ball. But initially, it was kind of like, does he not pass because he doesn't get enough opportunity? He's in there for 8 minutes, so he's like, let me get my shots, right? And it kind of seems like that might have been the case because now that he knows he's playing, all of a sudden, he's making the extra pass, right? Pods returns and looks great. I think that Pods, the way he plays, he probably had a ton of little injuries that were nagging him along with the oblique. So it allowed his body to heal up. And then maybe more importantly, it allowed his mind to heal up, right? Because he looked like the swaggery, confident. Did I just say swaggery? Swaggery? Like I've been watching too much Kalena, right? But he had the same swag that we saw when he first stepped on the scene as a rookie last night. Just, when he played 17, 18 minutes, right? But he had confidence. He looked refreshed. And I also think that him missing the time helped this silly narrative that he was to blame for so much of the losing, right? Because it looked the same when he was out, right? So it kind of wiped that away a little bit, and I'm excited to see him charged back up and just in the nick of time, right? For the Warriors to make a push. We know how jumbled up the standings are, and so anything's possible at this point right now. Underdog Fantasy, sponsor of the channel. This is the last opportunity to get up to $1,000 bonus on your first deposit. And you can use the code Alchemy. They have, what do they have? They have the split pot promos going for the championship games this weekend in the NFL. I will start giving you Warrior picks here moving forward. The reason why I haven't been is the injuries and the rotations have been all over the place. So I didn't feel comfortable saying like, hey, like this, like that the picks have been too all over the place. If we can settle back into a rotation, you'll get more Warrior picks from me. But as always, it's a great way to support the channel. So the link will be in the description. That's Underdog. But yeah, Lakers Saturday night. The Lakers have kind of been in the same situation we've been in, just hovering around 500. They are designed much differently, obviously, right? They're almost too big, too slow. And so I'm curious to see what Quentin Post looks like against this Lakers defense. It may be another all-you-can-eat buffet. And, Schroeder, we focus on Steph, which is obviously the most important thing. Like, how does Post play with the chef? And, what does that look like? Is Steph happy? Does this synced up? But it also going to help Schroeder a ton. You saw how much more comfortable Schroeder is with a stretch five where he can turn the corner, flip it back, and the paint is open. And so, yeah, I expect them to build off this win and smack this older, bigger Laker team around Saturday night. Hit that like, share, and subscribe. I'm out, y'all.